afternoon. Welcome to TNC Radio.live. This is the Truckers Network Radio Show. Now here's your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNC Radio.live, where we offer the entertainment, sports, weather, traffic, news, and information that our commercial drivers want to hear. Speaking of entertainment, do you like spy novels and movies? How about Bond, James Bond? Today we have a treat for our listeners. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Wesley Britton, author and a James Bond spy TV movie and espionage expert. Wesley was invited by the International Spy Museum to conduct 2 presentations on spy TV and the story of Mossad agent Eli Cohen. Wesley has been featured on national and international radio shows, and he's an expert on fictional and factual spies. Wesley is the author of Spy Television, Beyond Bond, Spies in Fiction and Film, Onscreen and Undercover, the ultimate book of movie espionage, and the Encyclopedia of TV Spies. Wesley also has his own sci-fi series called the Beta-Earth Chronicles. Welcome, Wesley. Thank you so much for being on the show. This is going to be a treat.
Thank you. Boy, I can't believe I did all that. You read that off like, whoa, I did that? Really?
You're very accomplished. Oh, my goodness. I thought we could start with you telling our listeners a bit about yourself and how you got so involved with the spy and espionage genres.
Well, that's kind of easy to say because I'm a baby boomer. And back in the 60s, every one of us was deluged with the James Bond phenomenon. Back then, TV was just full of spies. Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Avengers, Man in the Suitcase, Secret Agent Man. You can go on and on and on. They're on there. I Spy, Get Smart. And when I got into something, because back then, not only did you have the shows on TV and all those movies, the Bond movies, the Matt Helm movies, the Chris File and the other books of Glenn Dayton brought to the screen. But it was a time of real popular culture where we had bubblegum cards for the Man from U.N.C.L.E. and toys of all kinds, guns and gizmos and gadgets of all shapes and order. So if you were a kid in the 60s, you were going to be surrounded by spies and comic books. And hell, even Flipper got into the act of all.
Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah. Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp, Secret Squirrel. It was coming at us from every direction, and it was a lot of fun. And then as the years went by, the 60s left, and other things came along. But I still maintained an interest in spies, especially because I really got into reading lots of spy novels, Ian Fleming, Len Dayton, John le Carré, tons and tons and tons others over the years. And of course, the movies, and they changed decade by decade, and we can talk about that as we go along, perhaps. It was just kind of the baby boom 60s that got me into the spy game. And what really kicked me off in terms of being a professional about it was in the early 2000s, I had been writing an awful lot of scholarship because I got my PhD in American literature. So I've been writing all this stuff about Mark Twain and Nathaniel Hawthorne and authors like that. And I thought, I want to do something for fun. And I thought about TV spies. And then I realized, well, I've got a lot of research sitting right over there. My office was just a big long shelf of books, specifically The Avengers, Man from U.N.C.L.E., I Spy, you name it. But nobody had written a book about the whole genre from 1951 to then 2003. And I thought, okay, since nobody else has done it, I will. And man, that was a lot of fun because I had all those books over there and I had all those places I could go online to find things and magazines, and research is just, I love it. I had a lot of fun with that. So much to my surprise, I led to 4 books and a big, huge website. And since I said that, everybody out there, for a long time, one of my big claims to fame was the spywise.net website. Mm-hmm. It's huge. It's full of things on fact and fiction and movies and TV and old-time radio and you name it. And then when I started doing the sci-fi stuff, I kind of let it go aside and lost the name, the domain name. Somebody else got it. So we decided just last year to reactivate it. SpyWiseSecretDossier.com is what it's called now. And we're in the process of revising it. What's up now is everything that was there when it was originally there. But my webmaster is presently doing a lot of window dressing and revising and cleaning up and dropping this and adding that. And we'll see how it goes. But man, it's if you like spies, there's something for you in there somewhere. It's amazing all of the directions that thing has set me off into. And maybe I'll tell some of those stories as we go. But I should probably take a breath. Let you ask a question.
Well, why do people like spies? What is it about spies that everybody can get into? I know that some of the gadgets that James Bond had were really cool. What's interesting is a lot of that stuff's being used today. We didn't, people didn't think about it at that time. And of course, he had the most glamorous life, had all these beautiful women. Is that the intrigue too? Plus the danger?
Depends on what decade you're talking about.
Okay.
Because you really have to look at the 20th century. For the first century, people had any interest in spies. Because before that, spies were a very disreputable bunch. In fact, in the Encyclopedia Britannica, it says, whenever a spy is discovered, he is hanged immediately.
Oh, wow.
George Washington had to save a guy named John Honeyman, who had been a spy for him. But nobody knew it, so they thought that he was just a local traitor. But that's the reason people started using the term secret agent, is because spies didn't want to be called spies because they were so disreputable. And it depends on the decade, like when the Hoover administration was in, they did not want any espionage. They didn't believe that gentlemen read each other's mail. He disbanded, the one successful spy agency they had, that was the Code Breakers, that they used in World War I. And then World War II came along and things changed. And then it was all about spying on the Germans and the Japs and all that. And then that war was over and everything switched over to the Cold War. And the Cold War is kind of where we really got interested. Before that, it was, there was all kinds of movies and novels, Alfred Hitchcock being the primary one. There's really great movies that he had.
Sure.
But we kind of got mostly interested in then once James Bond kicked in, because that was the real glamorous version of spies, which of course has nothing to do with reality. Because, by the way, James Bond isn't really a spy. He's an investigator, like a lot of spies and movies and literature and all that. They don't go undercover very long. They don't spend years, with a secret identity or a cover identity, checking things out. They just kind of go from assignment to assignment, investigating. They're really detectives in many cases. The only big difference between the spy detective or secret agent and a normal detective that you see in, Agatha Christie stories and things like that, is they tend to look for murders and puzzles and thefts in a local area.
Right.
Or in Chicago or New York or something like that. Whereas your secret agent often is a globetrotter. He gets to go out. And the crimes they investigate are typically of a larger scale and a greater consequence. Called war between the superpowers, or a lot of movie and TV stuff. It's these megalomaniacs who've got these crazy sci-fi gadgets that could destroy the world.
Oh, yeah. And really cool cars. And they always get the beautiful women. Always.
Not always, but most of the time that's true. In the James Bond realm of things. There's a lot more realism in other kinds of projects that the spy doesn't fare quite as well as Mr. Bond. And even he's had trouble in the recent years in the Daniel Craig version.
So who would you say was, in your opinion, was the best James Bond?
I've got to go with Sean Connery.
Yeah.
He's the one I grew up with. I've got to give a special note to George Lazenby, because we kind of got to be friends there for a while. I had the opportunity to interview him a couple of times. In fact, one of my favorite radio interviews I ever did was I got him on a radio show I was co-hosting. At the same time, I had on Vic Flick. And Vic was the guy who played the James Bond theme on the guitar. The bum, 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 bum.
Sure.
No, I mean, making music, I suck.
We have to go to break, Wesley. I hate to do that. I hate to interrupt you in mid-sentence there, but I definitely want to pick your brain some more about James Bond, espionage, spies, and secret agent men and women, for that matter. We're speaking with Dr. Wesley Britton. He's an author, an expert on spy movies, TV, and espionage, and you're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 4 simple ways to improve your physical health as a truck driver. Being a truck driver is a rewarding career. However, it's not very rewarding for your physical health. A truck driver's lifestyle makes it difficult for them to be healthy. Because of their lifestyle, truckers are more likely to develop serious health issues like obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, and more. Although a truck driver's lifestyle doesn't promote healthy living, it doesn't mean that a truck driver cannot be healthy while on the road. There's several ways you can improve your health on the road. Here are 4 things you can start doing today to improve your physical health on the road as a truck driver. Avoid harmful foods. Avoiding unhealthy foods is way harder than it sounds. As a truck driver, your healthy food choices are extremely limited. While it may seem impossible to completely cut out unhealthy foods from your diet, it might be a good idea to cut back. You can start cutting back on unhealthy foods by packing meals in your truck. That way, the next time you get hungry on the road, you can eat a much healthier meal instead of eating greasy, high-calorie fast food. Another way you can start cutting back on unhealthy foods is to make a list of unhealthy items you eat every day and start slowly replacing them with a healthier option. For example, if you drink soda 3 times a day, cut back to 2, then to 1, and then none. Stock up on healthy foods. To live a healthier lifestyle, you have to cut back on heavily processed foods. Unfortunately, a truck driver's diet heavily consists of processed foods. Stocking up on healthy groceries is one of the best ways you can improve your physical health. When grocery shopping before your trip, avoid frozen pre-made meals, sodas, fried foods, chips. Instead, look for whole grain, fruits, veggies, and healthy fats. Start exercising. Exercise is essential to a driver's overall physical and mental health. Truck drivers have to get creative to stay fit while on the road. Finding the time to exercise can be a challenge for truck drivers. Drivers spend up to 11 hours a day on the road. After working all day, exercising may seem like the last thing you want to do, but you'll thank yourself later. Exercising a few times a week will not only improve your physical health, but also mental health. Get a good night's rest. The right amount of sleep is crucial for a truck driver. Lack of sleep can make driving dangerous. A study shows that long-haul truck drivers obtain less sleep than the required amount of alertness on the job. Truckers need a good night's sleep to be fully alert and ready to take on the road the next morning. Truck drivers travel several hundred miles each day. To reach their destination on time, they'll have to prioritize sleep so they can be alert and ready to take on the day. Not only is sleep an important factor for job performance, but it's also important for lowering stress levels and improving your immune system. Now, here are some ways to promote better sleep. Turn off electronics an hour before bed. Invest in a good mattress and pillow. Put up curtains in your truck cab. Avoid caffeine before bed. And exercise. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Join Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time for Women Road Warriors on your driver navigation station, tncradio.live.
My name is Bond.
Bond.
Bond. Bond.
Bond. Bond.
James Bond.
Yes. And we're talking James Bond here on the Truckers Network radio show and spies and secret agents. We're speaking with an expert on the subject, Dr. Wesley Britton, an author and expert on spy movies, TV, and espionage, as well as real-world spies. Wesley, I read somewhere that the James Bond enterprise really was a huge influence into the secret agent genre, and it paved the way for TV shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Mission Impossible. Would you say that Bond really brought that intrigue mainstream?
Oh, yeah, no question about it. Before him, there were, from 1951 on, there were spy shows on television. But the big problem in the 50s was that was the McCarthy era. And the government censors and even business groups really leaned hard on networks to deliver propaganda. They wanted black and white dualities. They wanted everything to be hyper anti-communist. So like the flagship series of the 50s would have been, I Led Three Lives. And I was a communist for the FBI as a movie. And all these little kind of almost documentary style things that were good for script writers because they didn't really have to write scripts. They just used government files because the government was very, very, very closely monitoring stuff. You didn't get a lot of fantasy or romance in those adventures until Bond. Dr. No blew it open. Goldfinger really blew it open. It changed culture in so many ways. That was the first blockbuster film ever. And yeah, that unleashed all that stuff I was talking about earlier, all that interest in spies. I remember as a fifth grader having my scrapbook somewhere. I wanted to grow up to be a secret agent until I read a recruitment thing for the FBI, and they recommended that you get a degree in accountancy. Oh, no.
That's boring.
Well, that would count me out.
That cat knocked me right out, yeah.
Yeah.
Gave up that fantasy pretty quick. So, yeah, you ended up writing about them rather than considering living that kind of life.
Well, I think that everybody maybe was intrigued. It took them to different places in the world. If
Yes.
their life was a bit boring, this was exciting stuff. And, of course, Sean Connery, he was just an icon. The way he handled that role, it was pretty awesome. How close would you say the Bond movies are to Ian Fleming's writings?
Only a few movies are anywhere close. Mainly the first three, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, and then On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Pretty much all the rest completely made up. They have little bits and pieces that they took from Fleming stories and books, but you can't go see any of the Roger Moore movies and expect to see a lot of Ian Fleming. Certainly not Pierce Brosnan. Although Timothy Dalton tried to return to the flavor of the Ian Fleming stories, but there's not a lot of anything right out of the books.
How do you feel about the direction of the James Bond movies now? Do you think
But we don't know what the direction of the James Bond movies are now.
Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. We don't want to say
Yeah?
too much about the latest James Bond movie because it makes some big changes. So we don't want to say much about it other than it was a really good movie.
Okay.
Okay.
Although I think probably everybody now knows how it comes to an end. It brings together, because what they decided to do with the Craig series was make it a mini series from Casino Royale to this one. It's an epic unto itself, and it's over. And obviously, you cannot go on in that mold. So what are we going to do now? And I read a really interesting article the other day from somebody who says that maybe what they need to do now is go back to the 60s and place the stories in the 60s, because that's really where James Bond milieu was. That's really, he really thrived. That's where everything was created, was back then. And it was a fun era for that kind of stuff. And so maybe they might do that. It's got to reboot somehow. And maybe that might be the way to go, because they do keep rebooting and changing. As time goes by, and you got to.
You know what I find interesting, and a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with Ian Fleming. He was a character in his own right. He had an interesting life, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He was involved in naval intelligence. He was involved in helping them shape the plans for what became the CIA, but the OSS at the time. I'm sorry, my dog is after something. I don't know what.
Your dog likes Ian Fleming, apparently.
I think my dog carries one way or the other. But yeah, he lived an interesting life. I'm not so sure his wife appreciated a lot of his habits. But, lived in Golden Eye in Jamaica, where he did most of his writing on his gold typewriter. And quite the imagination, wouldn't you say?
He had an imagination, and he was a bit eccentric, wouldn't you say?
Yes, no question about it. Because a lot of the things that he did in his books picked up from the tropes, a lot of them created by novelist John Butchen, the man who created the 39 Steps. And by the way, if you haven't seen the Hitchcock movie, The 39 Steps, it's a treat. It was one of his 1930s movies in black and white, and when he was still doing his movies in England. And I was in love with Madeleine Carroll. Of course, I wasn't alive when it first came out or anything like that. But put that on your to-watch list sometime. Where was I going with that? I lost track.
You were talking about Ian Fleming and his eccentricity.
Oh, yes. He was influenced by the Clubland writers, which were John Butchen, Sapper, and Dornford Yates. Because they, and Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu books, because they took a lot of stuff and made it very fanciful. And he enjoyed messing with the fanciful, because, you can't call his books realistic anyway. He was really good at descriptions. And as I guess everybody knows, he loves sports enough that in so many of those books we get long, protracted descriptions of golf or baccarat or poker or something like that. And anybody else couldn't have gotten away with that, but he did. And settings, like you were saying earlier, people love those books because it took us to places we're not likely to go.
Sure. When you think about it, a lot of people didn't really travel worldwide, even in the 60s. I mean,
it's true.
It wasn't as common as it is today. So, yeah. And certainly they didn't have the internet, so they could just look at something. So
no, that's right. Yeah.
Well, it's all very fascinating. And when you look at the James Bond enterprise, in my mind, that's what I think of when I think of a secret agent man. I mean, everything's circled around that. They even had the song Secret Agent Man.
Yeah, that was the theme song for the series, yeah.
Yeah. And people loved it, and it certainly gave birth to shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Mission Impossible that might not have happened, do you think?
Man from U.N.C.L.E. probably would not have happened if not for Bond. In fact, Ian Fleming directly and personally helped create that. He came up with the name Solo, that became the lead character's name, Napoleon Solo. But he couldn't stay involved with it because Eon Productions, who owned the Bond movies, did not want him involved in the TV project, so he had to take his name off. But he was directly involved with that one. From the Brits, we got the avalanche of stuff that was really already in the pipeline over there, like the Avengers, started in 1962, and Danger Man, which became Secret Agent, started before Bond 2. So those shows were ready to be exported right after Goldfinger, because Goldfinger is what blew the lid open. We got Uncle and I Spy and Get Smart and everything else that came. It was a fun time to be into spies.
Oh, absolutely. And people, and especially kids, oh my gosh, they could just dream. And all the gadgets you could get, hey,
oh,
Mom,
yeah,
Dad,
you could have your own briefcase with all the toys, all the guns.
Sure, absolutely. We have about a minute left. What I wanted to do was open up the forum on our next segment so that maybe Tom Kelly and Tom Kirk, who's also with us today, could do some interrogation, if you don't mind, since we're talking about espionage. They're going to interrogate you with some of their questions. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly and Tom Kirk, and we're talking with Dr. Wesley Britton. He's an author and expert on spy movies, TV, and espionage, and even real-life spies. Stay tuned for more right here on TNCRadio.live.
This blog on TNCRadio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 4 truck driving jobs for drivers under 21. So you just turned 18 and you're ready to find a job as a truck driver. But why is it so difficult? According to the United States federal law, A person must be 21 years old to drive a commercial vehicle in interstate commerce. Although you can obtain a CDL by the age of 18, you'll be limited to driving intrastate, and most trucking companies only hire drivers who are 21 years old or older. Also, insurance rates are much higher for trucking companies that employ drivers under the age of 21. But that doesn't mean there aren't truck driving jobs available before you turn 21. There are many jobs you can qualify for at just 18 years old. Although the majority of the truck driving jobs will be within your state lines, it's still a good idea to get your foot in the door and get a few years of experience before you turn 21. Under 21 Pilot Program. The FMCSA launched an Under 21 pilot program that helps Reserve and National Guard members ages 18, 19, and 20 explore civilian trucking careers. Commercial truck drivers are in high demand, and this program helps trucking companies hire disciplined and experienced drivers. For more information, visit www.fmcsa.gov/under21 military-drivers-info. Towing and recovery. Driving a tow truck is typically an intrastate job. While there's no age restriction, besides being 18 years old, some companies may still require you to be 21. Check with some of your local towing companies and ask what the age requirements are. Local delivery driver. Working as a local delivery driver is a great way to gain experience in your trucking career. You could start working for a local store or warehouse and deliver goods right to a customer's door. Here are a few places you can look for local delivery jobs: furniture stores, lumber yards, office supply stores. Dump truck driver. Driving a dump truck may not be your dream job, but it gets your foot in the door, and you can work close to home. Most local businesses will need dump truck drivers to move building materials, dirt, garbage, or other freight. Most truck driving jobs won't become available until you're 21, but you don't have to wait until then to start gaining experience. Getting a few years of experience on your resume before applying for big trucking companies will help during the hiring process. This blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Hey, this is the Road Hammers. You're listening to tncradio.live.
This is the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly and Tom Kirk, and we're speaking with Dr. Wesley Britton, who's an author, an expert on spy movies, TV, and espionage. He's had some really interesting tidbits. And I know that Tom Kelly and Tom Kirk are dying to ask some questions. They want to chime in because they've got questions about spy movies and TV. So go ahead, Tom and Tom, with your interrogations. Whoever wants to step up first.
Why don't you go first, Tom?
Okay, sure. So I'm very heavily into reading spy novels, and my favorite spy novel author is actually Robert Ludlum.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Good author.
And I like some of the older stuff too, the Rhineman Exchange. I mean, you know, some of the stuff that was made into movies, that's fine. Osterman Weekend and the Bourne movies and those kinds of things, but the Rhineman Exchange and some of the spy movies from World War II and so forth, I thought were absolutely fantastic. Of course, everybody knows who Tom Clancy is and the spy novels he put out. Most people have heard of, but few have read, and even fewer watched the movie, apparently, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Which
John Le Carre, of course.
Oh, just awesome. Just awesome. And Graham Greene's The Quiet American. Yes. That's an awesome one. The Day of the Jackal, which was not a great movie, but yeah, Frederick Forsyth on that one. I have never read, I'm not very familiar with The Quantum Spy. Are you familiar with that one?
No, I don't think I've even heard that name. Who was the author?
David Ignatius? I'm not familiar with
that name rings a very vague bell.
Ignatius, maybe? I don't know. It just doesn't ring a bell for me. Let's see, some other things are on this list. The Russian Pink by Matthew Hart. Obviously, The Secret Agent by Joseph Conrad, which it gets a little bit stuck there. What they don't have on this list is Catch-22. That ought to be on this list.
It's espionage about Catch-22.
Yeah.
Can't think of anything.
Or the Manchurian Candidate,
Well, that's a whole different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, still in the same general idea there. But a lot of good books on this list. Did you have a favorite author that you liked when
I have a lot of favorite authors. I will toss out 3 titles for consideration.
Okay.
The first time I went to the International Spy Museum, I asked the director what he would choose as the best spy novel ever written, and he picked Harlot's Ghost by Norman Mailer.
Interesting.
And I read it. It's a huge book. It's about 1,000 pages, and it was just part 1. He never did do part 2. But it was like a lot of the better movies and novels. It was trying to tell the story of the CIA from the beginning up until, I don't remember where he got to. But Harlot's Ghost is very, very detailed. And Norman Mailer's style, it's pretty dense.
Yeah.
Then I've had a lot of ex-covert agents that I have talked to over the years, and a perennial favorite seems to be Kim by Rudyard Kipling.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a great game. That kind of surprised me, too, because it's all about a little boy as a spy and doing things. But I would like to propose Don DeLillo's Libra as the best American spy novel we've had. Because usually when you think of spy fiction, it's the Brits who carry the day.
Right.
Graham Greene, Eric Ambler, Somerset Maugham, Ian Fleming, John Le Carre, Lane Deaton. You just keep going and going and going, and the vast majority are Brits. Who's our best American spy novelist? That's tough to find, although there's a lot more of them now than there used to be. Preston Fleming, and I'm not sure where Charles Cumming is from. But Libra is a very fanciful and very detailed look at Lee Harvey Oswald being used as a spy, as a cipher, in the assassination of John Kennedy. And it's very elaborate, where he does all these things and comes up with identities so he can get into Russia and then try to get into Cuba, and it's pretty dense. So I have to say it's pretty literary. But of all the American writers I've read, I got to put him up there. Well, I've enjoyed the books of a lot of people. Yeah. I love John Buchan's books. Of course, they're pretty dated because they were written before World War I or during World War I. Who else? I kind of like the Donald Hamilton Mount Elm books. They're very different from the Dean Martin movies because those were all very silly stuff. Donald Hampton's books are a lot more gritty, down to earth. Now, people that I know, Bill Retz and T.H.E. Hill, and the Preston Fleming that I mentioned earlier. He's one I've interviewed most recently.
Well, if you haven't read the Rhineman Exchange by Ludlum, that
I'm pretty sure I have.
Oh, very fun, very very fun story.
I don't only like Ludlum. I like the sequels by von Lussenberger. I can't remember his name. I've read a whole lot of them too. Because that's what Ludlum, Clancy, and Jack Higgins and Clive Cussler really became franchises. Every one of them spun off book series that other people are writing the books, but they bear their names.
Right. So
a lot of fun stuff there.
So obviously, Shelley, we could talk about spy novels all day.
Yes, you could.
And it sure does pass the time.
I was going to interject here something, Mr. Kelly, you didn't know. I was actually in an unabridged audiobook, Robert Ludlum, The Scorpio Illusion. I played the helicopter pilot.
Very
in the
cool.
Book. Yes, I did.
Very cool.
And some other voices as well. It was really cool. It was produced in Michigan, and it was much like old-time radio theater. We were all
I love that stuff.
Oh, it was wonderful. And one of the ladies, Elizabeth Harriman was her name, she used to do old-time radio. She'd been in the Lone Ranger and all of the different series, actually in Detroit. She could cold read like nobody's business. It was just fantastic. So I've been part of the spy genre, kind of. So anyway, Mr. Kirk, what kind of burning questions do you have for Wesley?
Well, I'm going to stick with the book thing for a second. This was something we were talking a little bit off air. I think I would say is the book that got me interested into this entire genre was written back in the 30s by a Robert Chambers called Secret Service Operator 13, which was about a young lady who became a spy for the Union during the Civil War, and some of the adventures there. Of course, there was romance and drama and intrigue and everything else. And we were talking a little bit about how the spy genre has impacted women and a variety of other issues. So would you care to go into that a little bit more, Dr. Chambers?
Dr. Britton?
Well, how the spy genre has had an impact on women and some of the issues there we were talking about.
Oh, yeah, you can go way back because the spy genre in literature and media and all that really started at the beginning of the 20th century. And in fact, the first film series of spies ever made were the girl spy movies with a Civil War heroine who worked for the Confederacy. In those old 10-minute little silent movies that they used to make back in those days. Back in those days, too, there's lots of filmmakers who always were trying to put up the Confederacy, so stand up for Dixie kind of things. But in spy movies, women could serve roles that they couldn't in other kinds of genres. For example, if you think about 60s television, in spy movies, the women could be there running along with the men, and they wouldn't be restricted to what a woman would have to be in a Western, or in most situation comedies where they would serve as housewives, or maybe demure secretaries, or things like that. In spy stories, they could be Emma Peel out there beating up the bad guys,
Sure. Yeah.
or Honey West beating up the bad guys, or Barbara Bain in Mission Impossible. They could go places and do things or Agent 99 and get smart. She was clearly a lot smarter than her bumbling partner.
Oh, absolutely.
And in the same token, it was good for minorities as well, because as Sheldon Leonard learned when he put I Spy together, is they could have Robert Culp and Bill Cosby as equals, because they wouldn't be having to ride in the front seat and the back seat in a southern city, because they were going to be in Mexico or Greece or Africa or somewhere international where the racial restrictions wouldn't be in place. So that gave, Bill Cosby a lot of freedom to do things that he couldn't have done in a police drama set in, say, Missouri or something like that.
Sure.
And the same true for Mission Impossible, because there's Barbara Bain and there is Barney Collier. So they were able to have that kind of equality built into a genre that would allow for that. And that was the secret agent genre was about the only genre that would be possible. But you could even go back further than that, the Hitchcock films. He was always big on making the women important. They weren't always damsels in distress or, sexual mataharis or things like that. But they were, often just as smart and as inventive, as creative as their male counterparts. And again, that was something from that particular genre allowed for, because it had that kind of scope. Does that make any sense?
Oh, absolutely. And Hitchcock was just brilliant at how he presented things, too. So
Yes. I'd do a whole segment just on the Hitchcock spy movies.
Oh, my goodness, yes. We have about a minute left. Did you have a quick question, Mr. Kirk? Or?
Well, I got a follow-up to that, so maybe it'd be better to wait till after our next break.
Okay. How about we go to break, and then we can delve further, because this is really interesting information, and I don't want it to interrupt. We're talking with Dr. Wesley Britton. He's an author and expert on TV spy movies and espionage. You name it, he's an expert. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. Mental health is a topic that isn't addressed enough in the trucking industry. There are many articles, websites, and businesses that can help truck drivers live a healthy lifestyle. But what about mental health? Mental health issues are not uncommon in truck drivers. In fact, trucking poses several risk factors when it comes to mental health issues. Lack of sleep, loneliness, stressful work environment, lack of physical activity. Truck driving can be rewarding, but health issues such as sleep apnea, obesity, diabetes, and depression can result from the strains of the job. So how do drivers prevent these health issues? Stress is an unavoidable part of trucking. Trucking allows you to see beautiful parts of the country, but it also puts you in many stressful situations. Driving in traffic in unfamiliar cities creates stress on a driver. There's stress when you're not sure if you're going to be able to deliver your load on time. You also can become stressed when you're away from home for so long. As you can tell, there are plenty of stress triggers when you drive professionally for a living. One of the best ways to reduce stress is by learning how to handle it. I realize it's easier said than done. It takes time and self-discipline. Here are some examples of ways you can reduce stress as a truck driver. Listen to music or a podcast. Start eating healthy. Exercise or stretch. Talk with family and friends. Get good sleep. Plan your trip out. In addition to managing stress, there are other ways you can keep good mental health while on the road. Drivers often portray the image of being tough. Mental health is not a discussion that many truckers are going to have. Communicating your mental health struggles with friends and family, therapists, or other drivers is a good way to work through your mental health struggles. Here's some more ways you can stay mentally healthy when you're on the road. Stay in touch with loved ones. Establish a morning and night routine. Bring a pet on the road. Travel with your spouse. Consider team driving. Bring things on the road to keep you entertained, like a laptop, video games, or TV. Occasionally book a hotel room. It's nice to get out of your truck every once in a while. Mental health is just as important as physical health. Drivers need to prioritize their mental health and take the necessary steps needed to be mentally healthy. It all starts with communicating with someone you trust, managing stress, and taking time out of the day to do something nice for yourself. For more information on mental health in truck drivers, check out Common Mental Health Issues Truck Drivers Face on thetruckersnetwork.net. For the latest in traffic, weather, and information, catch the Morning Grind weekdays right here on tncradio.live. And this is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly and Tom Kirk, and we're talking with Dr. Wesley Britton, who's an author and expert on spy movies, TV, and espionage. Wesley, I really love your theme music, which we just heard. It fits wonderfully as a theme for what we're talking about. Who composed that?
My friends in a local band called Jelly, Jarrett and Bean. And the bass player, you really can hear him in that little segment, Jeffy, and Aries, their fourth member, who plays the soprano saw and other interesting things that gives them a real distinctive sound. But I've been bugging Jarrett to give me an instrumental for a long, long time. And it was before Christmas, I went over to their house to watch them practice something, and they started playing that song called FN. And I went, that's it. I want that one.
Oh, it's great.
I said, okay.
And it works really well with what you cover.
Yes, it does.
It's your persona. It's great. So, Mr. Kirk, I understand you have a question for Dr. Wesley.
Well, I think a great question is, since we do deal a lot with trucking on this, can you think of any movies, books, etc., in terms of espionage that deal with trucking or the trucking industry?
The one example that springs to mind is in the Timothy Dalton Bond movie, License to Kill, because there's a big major scene toward the end where there's this big truck chase, gas trucks, oil trucks, one of the two, along a mountain edge, you know. That one jumps out at me because that was a really gripping and exciting scene in that particular movie. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but I can't help but think that there are a lot of trucking episodes in the Donald Hamilton Mount Helm movies, because he had a lot of them set out west and in the desert and just really all over America. And it would seem very likely. I can't say for sure. I'd have to go. It's been a long time since I read those pulps, but I would think that'd be a good place to look.
So
That
what about-
definitely is something. And you made me just think of a movie from the 60s, and I can't think of it, but it's a premise where there's basically people chasing a truck that they think is full of something for NASA or one of those types of programs, and in reality it's a decoy truck, and Russian spies or whoever are chasing them all across the desert Southwest. And if anybody can think of the name of that movie, please email us at info@tncradio.live, because one, I'd like to remember the name of it, and two, I'd like to pass it on to Dr. Britton.
Sure, yeah.
That'd be excellent. I have
Good
kind of a
point.
question here that kind of has been lurking around in my head, if you will. What's the difference between real life secret agents and the movies?
For the most part, they have very, very little in common. Unless you're going to look at, movies and books in the sphere of John Le Carré. Now, in terms of books, there's an awful lot of stuff that, especially in recent years, at my website I was telling you about earlier, there's one book reviewer named Mark T. Hooker who wrote a whole series of reviews based on books from the Brits that were from real agents. There's a whole genre of novels and nonfiction books written by retired agents, and so you get a lot of the real life built into those stories because they got some credibility, and they use research. In their movies, Lordy heavens, there used to be more realism back in the 50s because they were kind of more documentary oriented, and the FBI was more cooperative with certain endeavors if they thought they could get some propaganda out of it. But from those days until they were filming The Agency in 2001 after 9/11, that the CIA cooperated and let them film scenes in their headquarters. But there'd been a long time in between that the CIA had just kept its distance. But for the most part, gadgets and things like that, sometimes it's kind of funny that the movie producers come up with stuff and the spy experts come out and say, hey, does that work? Can we do that? Like in Thunderball, there's the underwater breathing device that Bond uses. It doesn't exist. It didn't exist, but CIA wondered if it did. If so,
did they really? That's true? Oh, is that funny?
Oh, and in Mission Impossible, too, they would come up with all kinds of different things. And intelligence agencies would come by, how did you do that? Does that work? Of course, no, it never does.
So it kind of influenced technology.
You could say, the one thing that really kind of comes through that I can remember, speaking of Chambers, John Chambers was a CIA disguise expert who came up with all kinds of faces and things for operatives out in the field. Like he came up with all kinds of masks and disguises for Iran embassy employees that had them fake being a Hollywood film crew to get them out. He also did the ape costumes for the Planet of the Apes movies. So there was that crossover between that particular aspect of espionage, disguises and Hollywood makeup. I could probably think of more stories.
I would imagine. Go ahead, Tom.
I do have a quick question because I know legend has it that I believe it was The Hunt for Red October was inspired, at least in part, by things that Tom Clancy read in various newspapers to the point where various agencies were asking, how did you find out this information? So is there any truth to that, or is it just legend? Or
No, that's true. Yeah, there's a Soviet sub commander who wanted to defect to help stop the war. In literature, there's all kinds of things that were inspired by revelations or news stories or things like that. So I guess it does come to Hollywood because it came to the book first and then the movie. When Sean Connery stole the movie from Baldwin. But that kind of stuff happens all the time. If you watch the news and you watch what's happening in contemporary events, especially because spy writers and novelists look to the headlines. What's contemporary, what's hot, what's happening, and then mess around with it.
Gives them inspiration. We We have about 3.5 minutes or so, and I would like you to be able to talk about your website, where people can find you, Wesley. You've got your sci-fi series as well as the books you've written about spy movies and TV and all of that.
Well, since we were talking about spy books, I have one of my novels, my sci-fi series, the Beta-Earth Chronicles, is basically that's 5 books long. And then I set off 2 kind of side streams that kind of the next generation, one of which are stories set on Beta-Earth during the Alman War. And I based all those stories on books that I read about French female resistance fighters in World War II. Because that gave me a level of realism and credibility and odd anecdotes and things like that to pepper it up. And I'm also working on spy stories featuring a secret agent named Mary Carpenter. That's on our planet 20 years in the future, after global warming has had a big impact on us, and after these plagues have been released by a terrorist group I call the Everlasting Caliphate. And if it's 20 years in the future, and because of those plagues, I have them looking back on these times and this pandemic as kind of the gentle pandemic. Because compared to what's coming, it is comparatively gentle. Well, the stuff I made up anyway.
Right.
One of those stories you can find at Amazon called The Fates of Evil Men, where she's fighting white supremacists in Dallas, based on places that I knew because I lived there for all that time. I got 2 websites. One is drwesleyBritton.com. That's my Beta-Earth Chronicles website. SpyWiseSecretDossier.com. That's all the spy stuff. I do have a Facebook. I have several Facebook pages. SpyWise Secret Dossier is my spy Facebook page, and I have a Beta-Earth Chronicles Facebook page and a personal Facebook page. Goodreads blog. What else have we got? Oh, a YouTube channel where there's all kinds of interesting videos there. One of which I'm not going to have time to tell you about, but I appeared as a talking head on an Al Jazeera documentary about Israeli spy Eli Cohen. I'm the only English speaker in the whole thing.
I would love to have you back, Wesley. Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
We've got so much information. This has been so fascinating. I've been having so much fun. All of us have. We have to go to the top of the hour here, but definitely everybody needs to check out Dr. Wesley Britton, the author and expert on spy movies, TV, and espionage, and he's got his own sci-fi series, everything. You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show. I'm Shelley Johnson, your host. Stay tuned for more here on TNCRadio.live. Thank you for listening to another great interview on TNCRadio.live and the Truckers Network radio show. All of the material you hear on TNCRadio.live on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of TNCRadio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live.